Hello, everybody. My name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today, we'll be diving into a softball interview that Ed Litton received from a Southern Baptist podcast that is very establishment friendly. We'll see that one of the guys actually works for the North American Mission Board, which is Woke Church Plant Central. So, we're going to react to some of the nuggets of wisdom that Ed Litton is providing in his softball interview. So without further ado, let's roll tape. And by the way, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Those really help with those magical YouTube algorithms that we're all controlled by.
Job one in pastoring your church and an important job in leading the convention, which you don't get paid for. So I know that's a difficult task. And we got a couple of questions we want to ask you. And I want to kick it off by asking you this. I know you were in Anaheim recently with our co-host Matt here, and you were meeting with pastors and church leaders there. And as we're getting ready for the annual meeting, as crazy as that sounds, as we just ended one, what are you most excited about as we prepare for Anaheim?
I'll tell you what excites me the most is, people think of California, you get a certain image in your head of liberalism and all the things and the restrictions. Anaheim's wide open. It was absolutely, and they are excited. The pastors all over the state of California are excited. But here's what I think. I think for all of us as Southern Baptists to go to California, where our brothers and sisters are doing real ministry, effective ministry in very difficult circumstances. If we can see that, I think we'll be looking into our future. It's what I call back to the future. Because what's happening in the South, where I pastor right now, is that we're seeing a radical form of secularization, and it's mostly among our children. And what's happening is we're going to be facing the same kind of restrictions and the same kind of cultural shift away from the gospel-centric Bible Belt mentality.
So I want to do a point of order, because if you think about it, if you look at American history, the boomers were the generation that brought on the whole sexual revolution, which, that was them. They were probably the most left-wing generation in United States history, if you think about who's in charge of the establishments that the long march through the institutions took over. Boomer generation. Now, millennials are probably the second most, if not even more, but only because of the boomer generation. But I actually have a lot of hope for Gen Z. They are extremely polarized, which is good. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. They're an extremely polar generation. I think that there's a lot of hope in that polarity, because that is where this civil war that we're seeing in our culture is playing out, and that generation is divided. But the young people that are fervent in the faith are on fire. My opinion on the situation. So anyway, I have more hope for that generation if we can nurture that generation, because the older generations definitely didn't do their jobs. Collectively speaking, if you're not the problem, then you're not the problem, so don't be offended by what I said.
That we've benefited from for a long time. And so I think California is a look into our future, and I think we'd be wise to learn from our brothers and sisters out there. It's a great place. They're excited about us coming.
We're all excited about heading to Anaheim. While you were there, you announced your theme that you had picked for the annual meeting. Would you care to share that with everybody and tell us how you got to that theme?
Besides California, this will be the first time I've shared it on any kind of format. So basically the theme is Jesus, the center of it all. And it's based off Colossians 1, chapter 1, 15 through 23, but primarily, obviously, Colossians 1:18.
Now, I trolled him on Twitter when he announced this theme, and I'm like, did he get that idea from J.D. Greer too? It's just, all right. It's better than the world is watching, which of course was meant to substitute the fact that Jesus is watching, because they cared way too much about the world is watching at the last Southern Baptist Convention, and it showed. That's why they appealed to the world, to the pagans. The pagans are watching. We must behave for our pagan overlords. That's basically how SBC 21 went down, and that's why the conservative resurgence was handily defeated. They were decisively defeated. and we shouldn't pretend otherwise.
Putting Jesus, or I say putting Jesus, he's already there. Recognizing Jesus as the center of it all is something that is going to be healthy for us. It's going to help us remember that if he's the center of it all, then it's all about him. It's for his glory. And I think a lot of things that divide us are going to melt away, or they should. And that we should choose to let some things go that are not essential. And then determine together to do what he desires, and that is for us to take this gospel to the nations.
Absolutely. And you talk a lot about unity, and the Baptist Press recently shared about it. And when we focus on that and unite around that, of course, a lot of those walls come down. And so could you elaborate on why?
We're going to start talking about unity here. Unity, that big buzzword that's meant to create a big tent around heretical false religions like the social justice gospel. And again, abhorrent practices or ecclesiology such as egalitarianism.
Unity is so incredibly important to you, and maybe from the very limited role, of course, we know the role of the SBC Pastors Conference, and we've talked about that on the podcast before, but from your role there,
Right.
What you want to do to promote unity in the Southern Baptist Convention.
Well, let me say this. It's important because it was important to Jesus. John chapter 17, this was his high priestly prayer. He said, Father, I want them to be one as you and I are one. And so we have an obligation unto him to be unified, to work for unity, to work at giving honor and love and appreciation to one another, and accepting the variations that we have that are not essential. And so things that are important to see. I think the other reason is it's our credibility. Jesus made it very plain that by this they will know you're my disciples, that you loved one another. And the world is not watching us love one another well. And so one of the things we have to each individually do, because we're very autonomous and independent churches and people, that we need to, by choice, out of obedience to him, for his glory, love one another visibly and to encourage one another. And so a lot of things that we go public with, we ought to go private with first.
That's the 11th commandment of the Southern Baptist Convention. Thou shalt not speak ill of another Southern Baptist. It's meant to suppress calling out of false teaching. That's basically what it's meant to do. You can't say Al Mohler's platforming woke. In fact, you can't call out the Southern Baptist professors. You can't call those people out. 11th commandment, you're in violation of Matthew 18, which is not... I'm paraphrasing their arguments because that's not how Matthew 18 works. Matthew 18 is about private sin committed against one another. It's not about public false teaching. But Matthew, the Southern Baptist Convention in their 11th commandment would have you think otherwise. So that's what he's talking about there. But let's take a moment to discuss what it is that sows division in a church and who's actually responsible for it. Is the person introducing the teaching, the divisive teaching, the one sowing division, especially if it's a false teaching, or is it the ones reacting to that, trying to drive it out, that are sowing division? That's the issue that we're seeing with the whole Southern social justice gospel in the Southern Baptist Convention. The people who are bringing critical race theory into the church are bringing in a false doctrine. They are the ones sowing division. They are the ones upsetting the unity in the convention, not the people trying to drive those people out. Because false teaching and false teachers should be driven out of the church. These are biblical commands. This is a biblical construct. And that's also the job of a shepherd, to protect the flock from wolves. That's their job. So we need to remember who it is responsible for the disunity in the church. It's the person bringing in the sin. It's the person bringing in the false teaching. And Ed Litton is certainly guilty of that, because he's a egalitarian as well as extremely woke. And we're going to try to see him buff up his not woke credentials, and I don't think it's going to work.
And we ought to, and I'm not talking putting on a show, I'm talking about from the heart, loving one another. It is our mission, and our challenge is, and here's what I said in Anaheim. I'm asked this question: how can you unify? You just asked me again. It's a work of the Holy Spirit in individual hearts, and it's a work collectively that the Holy Spirit has to do. And I think we come back and submit to the Word of God, and at this point where we have to really question why we go public, why we attack, why we fight or fuss over certain issues. And we are a warrior people, but I think we're fighting the wrong people.
Very well said. One of the more polarizing topics in American culture is what's happening at the U.S. border. And as I understand, while you were in California, you had a chance to go to the border and see what Southern Baptists were doing, not on a political point, but as they're working to advance the kingdom. Share with us, what was that like, and how can we who pastor churches get involved?
Listen, it was incredible. And it's really a testament to the associations of our convention, because the San Diego Association has a Hispanic pastor that goes across the border, and on a daily basis, 6 days out of 7 every week, he's feeding up to 500 people, and for breakfast, which is the most important meal for children. And so there are a horde of people that are living in tents. They have nothing to cook with. They have no food. And it's Southern Baptists that are going across that border. Now, I'm going to say, from a political standpoint, I have strong conservative opinions about that border. I believe that every nation.
No. Bet on it. He's lying here. Bet on it.
Has to have its own borders. Those borders have to be secure. But the reality is, my politics takes a back seat to the gospel.
A 2006 Democrat would say the same thing. By no means are they conservative. In fact, it's not that the left doesn't actually believe in border security. It's the fact that they are using this issue to achieve a cultural terraforming revolution. I'm sure once they achieve the power that they want, they will actually take border security far more seriously. This is a means to an end. An unstable border is a means to an end for the left. It's not what they actually believe. It's a means to an end. A means to destabilize the demographics of our country, to create a new order, and that new demographic shift, especially in the electorate, if they can get that, that's why they want illegal immigrants to vote, is so that they can eventually just make it so they can't lose an election. It's a genius play that they're going for, but let's not pretend like they don't believe in border security. It's that they're using border insecurity for political purposes.
And what I'm seeing happening is amazing. God is bringing the nations to us. And not only are we ascending people, but we are also people who receive those that are coming with the good news. And I want to give you an illustration. There were a group of 150 Haitians about a year and a half ago that showed up at a church in Tijuana. And that pastor literally converted his worship center into a dormitory, took them in, led many of them to Christ, discipled them. And about 3 weeks before the Haitian earthquake, the government allowed them into San Diego, where there is a Haitian pastor named John that was looking to plant a church. Now think about this. When all of a sudden you get 150 Haitians show up who have been discipled for the last year and a half, he's got his church plant. And it's absolutely amazing, the parallel. IMB on one side, NAM on the other side. And I'm not saying they're directly involved in this particular scenario, but this opportunity for us to work together on this border is a powerful thing. And of course, our government, we hold responsible as citizens for their actions. But when it comes to the gospel, guys, I'm telling you, I'm proud of Southern Baptists along the border that are ministering to people, leading people to Christ. And it was a blessing to be over there and to see it up close, to help feed people. There's some amazing stories.
It's always good to hear about the different work that's going on through our associations and our national entities as well. Really loved hearing how the associations are working down there. Matt, maybe you can get some ideas as you transition to being an AMS. But your role, of course, is as president of the Southern Baptist Convention. But the role that you've had longer and really the most important role that you have is your role as a pastor of a local church. You pastor a large growing church where you shepherd those people and you teach those people and preach to those people, but you also happen to be president of the Southern Baptist Convention. How do you balance those two realities and those two roles that God has assigned for you at this current place and time?
I'm going to let him finish, but I think we all know he has a team of pastors or a team of sermon writers. Take a sermon that J.D. Greer preached, which was probably served to him by Docent Research Group, to plug that content that I've done. And then they make the sermons for him, and then he delivers it. That's how he makes time. But yeah, I'm gonna let him finish.
As you know, walking is a balancing act, and it's one foot in front of the other. And so I have help. I have a great staff. We've added some to our staff to help us do this, to accomplish this.
Yeah, he's got his team of 8 people writing sermons.
I just wake up every day as a pastor, which means like today I've already been to a funeral, and I've called people in my church, counseling sessions. I had a preaching meeting with my preaching team, and so I'm here. And I remind myself and my church on a regular basis that my first calling and my highest honor is to pastor a local church. Being president of the Southern Baptist Convention wasn't on my radar, but I feel like God called me to it, and so do they. And so I feel strongly supported by our people, and they are a blessing. They have been for 27 years, and they are, which proves they're very patient people. But the most important thing I do personally is to make sure every day I meet with God, and that time is where my life flows from. That's where ministry flows from. That's where energy flows from. That's where direction and leadership flows from. And so it's my honor to pastor his church.
Awesome. And speaking of your role as the Southern Baptist Convention president, there has been absolutely no controversy whatsoever. We don't typically dive into controversy here. We usually just share the news and some of our views on various Southern foods and so forth. We don't usually even share a whole lot of commentary.
It's just
I know everybody just loves it. We can get along as we're eating together. But there have been some voiced concerns regarding your preaching, even calls for you to resign, not just the presidency, but also at your own church. If you had just a few minutes to simply share your heart, clear the air, whatever it may be, what would you say to the Southern Baptists who may hear this and maybe even share some of those same concerns?
Yeah, listen.
So now we're at the meat of this podcast, and that's why I wanted to make this video. And I'm listening to this for the first time, this part here. And yeah, this is what we came here for. Are you not entertained?
I understand why some people are concerned. I really do, because of what they're hearing. And and there's videos, and even people in my church, we've sat down and talked about it. And there's publications, things being said. So the best way I can describe, really, most of it centers, not all, but most of it centers around a Romans series that we did last year. And when we were outlining the series, that's a responsible part of pastoring and preaching, is that if you're going to preach through something, you want to outline what you're going to cover each week. And so I was looking to do that, and I was in the process of doing that. And I remembered that my friend JD had already done that, so I called him. And I said, can you send me a spreadsheet? He keeps his on a spreadsheet that shows me how you outlined it. I want to see how mine's lining up, if I'm approaching this right. And in that process, he gave me permission not only to do that, he said, any material at all, you're welcome to it. And I appreciated that. And I had no intention of doing anything with it, except I enjoy listening to him, and I enjoy how he handles certain things in teaching. So I did listen to him. And so here's what I want to make it very clear. Like any pastor, I used his material to help me outline it. And then I resourced his material after I'd done the Greek work, after I'd read my commentaries, try to get a sense of how this passage needs to be explained to my people. And there's a couple of places in particular where we shared the same outline. And there's a couple of places in particular where I used a lot of phrases that he did. And I just want to say this. I want to be clear. I think the older you get, the more set you get in language. and you tend to rely on what you've used in the past. I've always been the guy who wants to always figure out, am I really connecting with people, my people? I want them to understand this. I didn't do this, what I did, what it appears that I did. I don't think is exactly what actually I did. But the point is, when I did it, I wasn't trying to make a name for myself. I was trying to help my people understand Scripture. And I'll be honest with you.
What is he even talking about here? Does he not realize that we know that he was verbatim, like phrase for phrase, copying J.D. Greer's sermon? He was delivering the same exact sermon. He's copying the mannerisms, a lot of the words, like it's going to be a tough week. We're talking about Romans 1. He copied the words, the mannerisms, the jokes, the anecdotes. This isn't, like, he's really downplaying how much he plagiarized here. And this is him trying to come clean about it. And it's just not even close. He's not even really admitting what he did wrong. He's like, oh, we just had a same outline. Like, we broke down the same pericopes of the book of Romans. So anyone thinking that, these sermons are otherwise malicious or, other than that, they're not that similar. He's trying to say, like, how he speaks to people, how he teaches to people, is trying to relate to them. It's like, dude, you were sounding like the copyright or the plagiarized version of J.D. Greer. Like, we look at J.D. Greer's sermon and we look at his sermon and we know who the original is. We know who is trying to copy off of the kid next to them's paper. We know who that is, and it's you. It's you, Ed Litton.
Romans is an intimidating book for me. Now, you guys are a lot smarter than I am. It's probably not as intimidating for you, but it was. So I did rely on that. Here's the problem. I had permission, which I think means it's not plagiarism. The problem was
it's not what that
didn't,
means.
And it's obvious that I did not tell my people exactly the source that it came from. I didn't cite the commentaries I read either. And so that's what I have apologized to my people. They have very warmly accepted that. Our leadership and I have sat down and we've talked about how we can correct this. And we're in the process of correcting it. I'm fasting from certain things I've always done in preaching, and approaching every message I preach, whether it's at the convention or at a location or in our own church, I'm approaching it differently. And so I take this very seriously.
It's also worth revisiting that he did not plagiarize good sermon material. He's plagiarizing J.D. Greer's sermon on Romans 1, which was terrible. It was, as Charles Barkley would say, terrible. And it wasn't good material. There's a lot of error in that. And I actually thought he was very Marxist with his, the way he highlighted greed and the way he talked about greed and how you can't do business as a Christian. And it was just completely legalistic. It was legalism, what he was preaching. I did a video on that. You can check that out. I'll probably have that at the end of the video. So that's, Ed Litton trying to be self-aware, but here's the issue and why he was being called to resign as a pastor, not just as a Southern Baptist Convention president, which he should have resigned from, but obviously, you can't force a guy to resign him, and there's no real means to remedy that situation. But as a pastor, it is clear that he does not have the ability to teach. That he needs to copy from J.D. Greer. Specifically J.D. Greer. He has copied from other people, but specifically J.D. Greer. If he has to copy from J.D. Greer jokes, points, outlines, can he preach? Can he teach? And I think that is seriously called into question. And if that is called into question, then he is no longer qualified to be a pastor, according to 1 Timothy chapter 3. So that's the issue here. As far as him as a pastor goes, as a Southern Baptist Convention president, he's unqualified because, this guy's woke. He's also an egalitarian, which is outside of the norms and conventions of the Baptist Faith and Message 2000.
And this is what I share with my people. Every week, you have trusted me for 27 years to be a man of truth. And so I have to tell you the truth. And if you can't trust me, then I have no basis of leadership in this church. And so we're grateful for the opportunity to address it. But the other thing is, I believe the Lord's forgiven me. And I believe that the Lord is helping me learn even a stronger, better way to communicate. And we're moving on. We feel like we're dealing with it, and we're moving forward.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I think that very clearly articulates where you're at, and I do appreciate that. So I want to ask this question. Not only do I believe that we should give great grace, I believe that we should be people of prayer. I have you written down in my prayer journal, and many of our SBC leaders, I just pray for you guys on an everyday basis. How can I pray for you as you lead your family, your church, and the work of the Southern Baptist Convention? What are some specific things that we can pray for?
We have some real serious problems and struggles that we have to work through in a way that honors and glorifies the Lord and actually seeks to solve our issues. And that takes some serious people, serious-minded people, and people of a supernatural wisdom. So you can pray that I will have a supernatural wisdom in my role in that. But pray for all of our entity heads, everybody on committees and boards as we struggle through these.
Okay, I'm going to cut it off right here because we are approaching a half hour on this video, and I think we've cut through the meat of this podcast, whatever it is. And again, I'm not super familiar with this podcast, and I mostly listen to this for the first time because I ain't got time to pre-screen it. So with this said, Ed Litton got a softball interview where he just got, quick toss up, and he just was able to hit it up, T-ball home run here. And, they're not going to really hold his feet to the fire. They're not going to dig deeper into the fact that, no, you copied entire mannerisms, jokes, anecdotes. Like, he copied the whole shebang. It was the same sermon. So Ed Litton just got an opportunity here to lie through his teeth about what was going on. He got another opportunity to kind of lie about the disunity and what caused that, and to focus on this false unity, which really in their minds means submission. It means submission to his hierarchy. And again, I just want to close by saying, get out of the Southern Baptist Convention. They're not worth it. They're not worth it. You can't save this convention. They've tried it once. It didn't really work out well in the end. So just get out. Get out of it, And, part of the goal here is to save the sheep from the clutches of wolves. And I do believe Ed Litton is a false teacher. I do believe that. He is clearly on the wrong side of every important fight within evangelicalism. And, that includes, he is embracing the revoice movement to some capacity. He is embracing critical race theory. He is embracing egalitarianism. These are all bad things. He is a tool for the corruption of the Southern Baptist Convention. He was the preferred candidate of Kevin Ezell, and now he's a puppet. He's basically a puppet convention president of Kevin Ezell. He got what he wanted. And Kevin Ezell's one of the most corrupt individuals in certainly the modern day evangelicalism. He is definitely up there as probably the most corrupt figure. He is the phantom menace of the Southern Baptist Convention, and this guy's a mere puppet of that phantom menace. He is your Count Dooku of the Southern Baptist Convention. So get out of it. Get out of it. So that's all I got to say about this for now. If you like the Evangelical Dark Web, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you really like the Evangelical Dark Web, go to evangelicaldarkweb.org/join, and you can support the Evangelical Dark Web there by becoming a member through our Patreon-like system. Comment below what you think about what I think, and I will catch you on the next one. God bless.